The Galactic Dominion had ruled the stars for over 3,000 years. 847 species bowed to their might. Some had fought wars that lasted centuries before accepting defeat. Others had tried to hide in the dark corners of space. A few had even attempted to negotiate from positions of strength. All had failed in the end. Chancellor Vextar stood in his office overlooking the capital city of Zentaris Prime. The massive towers stretched toward the purple sky, each one housing millions of beings from across the galaxy. His reptilian eyes reflected the light from the twin suns as he reviewed the latest reports from the outer rim. Another species had been discovered, the humans of Earth. The initial scout reports were typical, a young civilization that had barely left their home system. They had established colonies on nearby worlds and built primitive space stations. Their technology was crude but functional. Their military consisted of simple ships with basic weapons, nothing that posed any real threat to the Dominion. What made Chancellor Vextar pause was the response to first contact. Usually new species, reacted with fear, aggression, or desperate attempts at diplomacy. The humans had done something different. They had asked questions. The scout captain, a veteran named Mordock, had sent a detailed report. When the Dominion fleet appeared at the edge of their solar system, the humans had sent a single ship to meet them. The vessel was small and clearly unarmed. It approached slowly and broadcast a simple message asking for peaceful communication. Mordock had expected panic or weapons fire. Instead, the human captain had introduced herself as So Young and asked if the Dominion representatives would like to visit Earth for discussions. She spoke in a calm voice as if meeting alien civilizations was something humans did every day. When Mordock explained that Earth was now part of the Dominion territory, So Young had simply asked what that meant and requested documentation about the integration process. The scout captain had been so surprised that he had actually provided the requested documents. So Young had thanked him politely and asked if there was a standard timeline for the transition. She wanted to know about trade agreements, administrative requirements, and cultural exchange programs. Mordock found himself answering her questions, as if he were a clerk in a government office rather than a military conqueror. Chancellor Vextar read through the transcript of their conversation 3 times. Something felt wrong about it, but he could not identify what exactly bothered him. The humans had accepted their new status without protest. They had asked reasonable questions about practical matters. They had even expressed interest in learning more about other Dominion species. Within 2 weeks, a human delegation arrived at Zentaris Prime. Their ship was clean and functional, but unremarkable. Ambassador Hyunwoo led the group of 12 representatives. He was a middle-aged man with short black hair and dark eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. When he stepped off the transport, he bowed slightly to Chancellor Vextar and spoke in perfect galactic standard. "Thank you for allowing us to visit your beautiful capital," Hyunwoo said. "We are honored to begin this new relationship between our peoples." His voice was steady and professional. There was no trace of fear or nervousness. He looked around the massive spaceport with what appeared to be genuine curiosity rather than intimidation. When Chancellor Vextar gestured toward the waiting transport that would take them to their quarters, Hyunwoo asked if they might have a brief tour of the city first. "We would like to understand how such a complex society functions," he explained. "Earth has much to learn from the Dominion's success." Chancellor Vextar had hosted thousands of diplomatic meetings over the centuries. New species usually arrived either trembling with fear or puffed up with false bravado. The humans showed neither reaction. They asked thoughtful questions about architecture, transportation systems, and waste management. They took notes on everything and made polite comments about efficiency and organization. During their first formal meeting, Hyunwoo presented a detailed analysis of Earth's resources and capabilities. The document was professionally prepared and contained information that would have taken Dominion intelligence months to gather. The humans had essentially done the work for them. "We believe transparency leads to better relationships," Hyunwoo explained when Chancellor Vextar expressed surprise at the comprehensive data. "We have included production capacities, population statistics, technological capabilities, and cultural information. If there are additional details you require, please let us know. The ambassador's tone remained calm and businesslike throughout the presentation. He discussed Earth's military forces with the same neutral voice he used to describe agricultural output. When Chancellor Vexitar mentioned the Dominion's policy of maintaining garrison forces on member worlds, Hyunwoo simply asked about housing requirements and supply logistics. General Mordok attended the third day of meetings. He was a massive creature with thick armor plating and scars from dozens of battles. His presence usually made new species visibly nervous. The humans treated him with the same polite respect they showed everyone else. They asked about his military experience and seemed genuinely interested in his strategic insights. Your integration of diverse species into a unified military structure is impressive, one of the human representatives, a woman named Airi, told the general. We would welcome the opportunity to study your methods. Mordok found himself explaining combined operations tactics to beings who should have been cowering in fear. The humans took notes and asked follow-up questions about supply chains and communication protocols. They discussed warfare as if it were an academic subject rather than a matter of life and death. On the fourth day, Chancellor Vexitar decided to demonstrate the price of defiance. He arranged for the execution of a prisoner, a member of a species, that had recently attempted rebellion. The ceremony took place in the central plaza with the human delegation present. It was meant to be a clear message about the consequences of resistance. The prisoner was brought forward in chains. He had been selected specifically because his species resembled humans in some ways. Chancellor Vexitar expected to see fear or horror in the human faces. Instead, Ambassador Hyunwoo watched the proceedings with calm attention. When the executioner raised his weapon, Hyunwoo pulled out a small device and began recording. The execution proceeded as planned. The prisoner died quickly and efficiently. The crowd of various alien species maintained respectful silence as they always did. Chancellor Vexitar looked toward the human delegation expecting to see the impact of his demonstration. Hyunwoo was taking notes. He wrote steadily while the body was removed and the plaza began to clear. When Chancellor Vexitar approached him, the ambassador looked up with the same pleasant expression he had worn throughout their meetings. Is this the standard judicial procedure for capital crimes? Hyunwoo asked. We would like to understand the legal framework that governs such decisions. His voice showed no emotion. He asked about the appeals process, the criteria for different types of punishment, and the statistical effectiveness of public executions as deterrents. He treated the killing he had just witnessed as if it were a bureaucratic process that required documentation. Chancellor Vexitar felt something cold settle in his stomach. In 3,000 years of Dominion expansion, he had never encountered a species that reacted to death with administrative curiosity. The humans were not defiant or aggressive. They were not afraid or desperate. They were simply taking notes and asking questions as if the entire galaxy were nothing more than an interesting case study. That night, as the human delegation reviewed their materials in their quarters, Chancellor Vexitar found himself unable to sleep. Something was very wrong with these humans, but he could not determine what exactly disturbed him so deeply. They had done nothing threatening or inappropriate. They had followed all protocols and shown proper respect for Dominion authority. Yet, somehow their very calmness felt like the most dangerous thing he had ever encountered. 3 months after the human delegation returned to Earth, the first group of human administrators arrived at Zentaris Prime. They came quietly, without fanfare or ceremony. Administrator Ji-hoon led a team of specialists in logistics, economics, and systems management. They requested modest office space and began reviewing the assignments they had been given. Overseer Krillnox had worked with newly integrated species for over 2 centuries. His insectoid species excelled at detailed work and complex calculations. He had guided dozens of primitive civilizations through their transition into Dominion membership. The process was always the same: fear, confusion, gradual acceptance, and eventual compliance. The humans were different. Ji-hoon arrived at Krillnox's office precisely on time for their first meeting. He wore a simple gray suit and carried a single data pad. His manner was professional and courteous. He thanked Krillnox for the opportunity to work together and expressed appreciation for the Dominion's efficient integration process. "We have reviewed the initial assignments," Ji-hoon said, consulting his datapad. "We are prepared to begin work immediately. However, we have identified several areas where minor adjustments might improve overall efficiency." Krillnox had expected this. New species often believed their primitive methods were superior to Dominion systems. He prepared to explain why the current procedures had been developed over centuries of experience. Instead, Ji-hoon presented a detailed analysis that made Krillnox's mandibles click in surprise. The human had not criticized existing methods. He had simply identified bottlenecks in resource distribution that could be eliminated through small changes in scheduling. His calculations were precise and his projections were conservative. The modifications he suggested would increase productivity in the assigned sectors by 12%, while reducing administrative overhead by 8%. "These are preliminary observations," Ji-hoon explained. "We will need several weeks of operational data to develop more comprehensive recommendations." His tone suggested he was discussing minor clerical matters rather than proposing changes to systems that had functioned unchanged for generations. Krillnox found himself agreeing to a trial implementation without fully understanding why. Meanwhile, economist Ari was meeting with trader Gazel, one of the most powerful merchants in the Dominion. The slug-like creature controlled shipping, routes that connected over 200 worlds. His organization had grown wealthy by maintaining careful monopolies and eliminating competition through methods that were rarely discussed openly. Ari sat across from Gazul in his luxurious office, overlooking the commercial district. She had prepared a presentation about Earth's potential contributions to interstellar trade. What she showed him instead was a complete analysis of his entire operation. "Your current route optimization is impressive," she said, displaying charts and graphs on the conference room's holo projector. "However, we have identified opportunities for significant expansion." The data she presented was accurate down to the smallest detail. She knew cargo capacities, fuel costs, crew schedules, and profit margins for every ship in his fleet. She had calculated the economic impact of weather patterns on agricultural worlds, the effect of political instability on manufacturing output, and the seasonal variations in consumer demand across different species. By adjusting your shipping schedules and establishing 3 new transfer hubs, you could increase overall efficiency by 41%, while reducing operational costs by 23%, Ari continued. This would generate an estimated additional profit of 2.7 billion credits annually. Gazul's translator struggled to keep up as he demanded to know how she had obtained such detailed information about his private business. Ari smiled politely and explained that the data was available through standard commercial databases. She had simply performed a comprehensive analysis. "We find that most organizations can benefit from systematic review," she said. "Would you be interested in our recommendations for the expanded route network?" The meeting continued for 3 hours. Ari presented solutions to problems Gazel had not known existed. She identified inefficiencies he had lived with for decades and showed him how to eliminate them. When he asked about the cost of implementing her suggestions, she informed him that humans would provide the analysis and consultation services free of charge as part of their integration contribution. Gazel left the meeting with a detailed implementation plan and a growing sense of unease. The human had not threatened him or demanded anything. She had simply shown him exactly how his business worked and how it could work better. The fact that she could do this after 3 months of studying Dominion commerce was deeply disturbing. Similar meetings were taking place across Zentaris Prime. Human specialists were quietly reviewing every system they encountered. They approached each assignment with the same methodical thoroughness. They asked questions, gathered data, and presented findings with calm professionalism. Dr. Yunji, a xenopsychologist, had been assigned to study interspecies relations within the Dominion administrative structure. Her preliminary report identified 17 distinct patterns of cultural conflict that reduced productivity in mixed species workgroups. She proposed simple modifications to office layouts, meeting schedules, and communication protocols that would address these issues. Captain Dongsu had been asked to observe Dominion fleet operations. His initial assessment noted that current patrol routes could be optimized to provide better coverage with fewer ships. The resources saved could be redirected to improve maintenance schedules and crew training programs. Engineer Min Ho had been given access to infrastructure systems on 3 industrial worlds. His report suggested modifications to power distribution networks that would increase capacity by 30% while improving reliability and reducing maintenance requirements. Each human specialist worked independently, but their reports showed a consistent pattern. They identified problems that had existed for years, calculated precise solutions, and presented their findings as routine observations rather than revolutionary discoveries. Overseer Krill Knox began receiving reports from administrators across the sector. Human involvement in various projects was producing remarkable results. Productivity was increasing, costs were decreasing, and efficiency ratings were reaching levels that had never been achieved before. More disturbing was how the humans accomplished these improvements. They did not demand additional resources or authority. They simply worked within existing systems and made small adjustments that somehow produced dramatic changes. They treated complex galactic logistics as if it were a simple puzzle that required only careful attention to solve. After 6 weeks, Ji-hoon requested a meeting with Krill Knox to discuss preliminary findings. The human arrived with a thick folder of documents and a calm expression that had become familiar to the overseer. "We have completed our initial assessment of the administrative systems in our assigned sectors," Ji-hoon said. "The results have exceeded our expectations." He presented charts showing productivity increases, cost reductions, and efficiency improvements across every area where humans had been involved. The numbers were impressive, but what troubled Krill Knox was the scope of the analysis. The humans had not simply focused on their specific assignments. They had studied the entire Dominion administrative structure. Their report included detailed observations about resource allocation, personnel management, communication networks, and strategic planning at the highest levels of government. "We noticed some interesting patterns in the overall system architecture," Ji-hoon continued. "There appear to be significant opportunities for optimization at the macro level." He opened a section of the report that made Krill Knox's compound eyes widen in alarm. The humans had mapped the complete power structure of the Dominion government. They understood how decisions were made, how resources flowed, and where the real authority resided. They had accomplished in 3 months what intelligence agencies spent years trying to determine. "We have prepared some preliminary recommendations for system-wide improvements," Ji-hoon said. "Implementation would be straightforward and could be accomplished with minimal disruption to existing operations." Krill Knox looked at the proposed changes with growing horror. The humans had designed a complete reorganization of Dominion governance that would eliminate corruption, increase efficiency, and strengthen central control while reducing the need for military enforcement. The plan was brilliant, practical, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. "Of course, these are only suggestions," Ji-hoon added. "We understand that any changes would need to be approved through proper channels." His tone remained calm and professional, as if he were discussing minor clerical adjustments rather than a complete transformation of galactic civilization. Krill Knox realized that the humans had essentially reverse-engineered the entire Dominion in 3 months and developed a better version of it. That evening, Krill Knox sent an urgent communication to Chancellor Vextar, requesting an immediate meeting. The message was brief but clear. The humans were not just adapting to Dominion membership. They were quietly taking it apart and rebuilding it from the inside. The Corvin Rebellion erupted without warning across 12 star systems. The avian species had secretly coordinated with 11 other races to launch simultaneous attacks on Dominion installations. Within hours, entire sectors were in flames, as rebel fleets engaged Dominion forces in desperate battles. War Marshal Throck commanded the response from his flagship in the Zentaris system. The massive warrior had fought in dozens of campaigns over 3 centuries. He understood rebellion and knew how to crush it. What he did not understand was why the humans had requested permission to observe the conflict. General Taman stood in the observation deck of his small ship, watching the battle unfold in the Corvin home system. The human vessel maintained a neutral position between the two fleets as they exchanged devastating weapons fire. Beside him, Dr. Yunji took notes while Private Ki-young operated recording equipment. Fascinating tactical adaptation, Dr. Yunji commented as the rebel forces attempted a flanking maneuver. They are compensating for inferior firepower through coordinated movement patterns. Her voice remained calm despite the explosions visible through the viewing ports. She analyzed the combat as if she were watching a training exercise rather than a battle where thousands of beings were dying every minute. Taemin reviewed data on his tablet while energy beams streaked past their position. He was documenting weapon effectiveness, shield configurations, and formation tactics for both sides. When a Dominion cruiser exploded nearby, he noted the time, cause of destruction, and estimated casualty count without showing any emotional response. The rebel fleet commander, Zixara, had sent multiple messages demanding that the humans choose a side in the conflict. Each transmission became more desperate as the battle continued. The humans responded to every communication with the same polite message requesting permission to continue their observations. War Marshal Throck found the human presence deeply disturbing. They had positioned ships throughout the war zone, always, in neutral positions where they could monitor both forces. Their vessels were clearly unarmed and posed no threat to either side. Yet somehow their calm observation felt more unsettling than enemy weapons fire. During a brief lull in the fighting, Throck opened a communication channel to Taemin's ship. The human general appeared on screen looking as composed as if he were sitting in an office rather than floating in the middle of a war zone. "General Taemin, your presence here is inappropriate," Throck growled. "This is a military conflict, not an academic study." Taemin nodded respectfully. "We understand your concern, Marshal Throck. We are maintaining strict neutrality and avoiding any interference with military operations. Our observations are purely for educational purposes." The human's tone suggested he was conducting routine research, rather than documenting a rebellion that threatened to tear the Dominion apart. When Throck demanded to know what the humans hoped to learn, Taemin explained that they were studying conflict resolution methods and strategic decision-making under stress. "We find that different species approach warfare with distinct patterns," he said. "Understanding these variations helps us appreciate the complexity of galactic civilization." Throck ended the communication feeling more frustrated than before. The human had been perfectly polite and completely infuriating. He treated the rebellion as if it were an interesting phenomenon, rather than a crisis that could determine the fate of billions of beings. Meanwhile, on the rebel flagship, Commander Zixara was having similar difficulties with Dr. Yunji. The human xenopsychologist had requested permission to interview rebel leaders about their motivations and objectives. She approached the subject with the same clinical interest she might show when studying a new form of plant life. "Your coordination across multiple species is remarkable," Dr. Yunji told Zixara during their conversation. "The psychological factors that enabled such cooperation despite historical conflicts deserve careful analysis." She asked detailed questions about rebel organization, communication methods, and decision-making processes. When Zixara described the suffering that had driven her people to rebellion, Dr. Yunji took notes and asked follow-up questions about the statistical relationship between oppression levels and resistance movements. "Have you considered the long-term sustainability of your current strategy?" Dr. Yunji asked. "Our preliminary calculations suggest that continued military confrontation will result in significant casualties regardless of the ultimate outcome." Her clinical approach to discussing mass death frustrated Zixara even more than Dominion propaganda. The human treated their desperate fight for freedom as if it were a business problem that required better planning. As the war continued across multiple systems, human observers appeared everywhere. They documented battles, interviewed prisoners, and analyzed supply chain disruptions with the same methodical thoroughness they applied to everything else. Both sides began receiving detailed reports on their own tactical performance from human analysts. Captain So Young had positioned her medical ship in a neutral zone, where she provided humanitarian aid to casualties from both forces. Injured Dominion, soldiers and wounded rebels received identical treatment from human medical teams. The doctors worked with professional efficiency, saving lives without regard for political affiliations. When Dominion commanders complained that humans were helping the enemy, So Young explained that medical assistance was being provided on a purely humanitarian basis. When rebels accused humans of supporting Dominion oppression, she gave the same explanation. Both sides found her calm neutrality more frustrating than outright hostility. 3 weeks into the rebellion, Dr. Yoon-ji published her preliminary analysis of the conflict. The document was distributed to both Dominion and rebel leadership through official diplomatic channels. It analyzed the psychological factors driving the rebellion, identified the root causes of interspecies tension, and projected likely outcomes for various strategic approaches. The report was written in the same neutral tone humans used for all their work. It discussed the deaths of millions of beings as statistical variables in a complex equation. It evaluated the effectiveness of different propaganda techniques and measured the impact of battlefield victories on civilian morale. Most disturbing was the final section, which presented detailed scenarios for ending the conflict. Dr. Yoon-ji had calculated the probable results of continued fighting, negotiated settlements, and complete victory by either side. Her projections included casualty estimates, economic impact assessments, and long-term stability analyses. War Marshal Throck read the report with growing anger. The human had essentially predicted the outcome of the war before it was half finished. Her calculations showed exactly how many beings would die, which systems would be destroyed, and what the ultimate resolution would look like. She presented this information as if she were forecasting weather patterns rather than describing the fate of civilizations. Commander Zixara had a similar reaction to the same document. Dr. Yoon-ji had analyzed rebel chances of success with mathematical precision. The report showed exactly where their strategy would succeed, where it would fail, and what modifications might improve their prospects. It read like a performance review rather than intelligence analysis of a life-or-death struggle. Both leaders found themselves in the impossible position of having their entire conflict reduced to a set of equations by beings who watched the fighting with scientific detachment. The humans had somehow made their desperate war feel like a laboratory experiment. The breaking point came during the Battle of Corvin Prime. As both fleets gathered for what would be the decisive engagement, Zixara sent a final ultimatum to the human observers. She demanded that they either join the rebellion or leave the system immediately. Dr. Yoon-ji's response arrived within hours. She thanked Commander Zixara for her concern and explained that humans had already completed their preliminary analysis of the conflict. The data they had gathered would be sufficient for their research purposes. We have prepared a comprehensive resolution proposal based on our observations, Dr. Yoon-ji's message concluded. The document addresses the underlying causes of interspecies tension and provides a framework for sustainable peace. Implementation would eliminate the need for further military confrontation. She transmitted a 847-page report that contained detailed solutions for every issue that had led to the rebellion. The document was organized with the same careful precision humans applied to all their work. It included economic reforms, administrative changes, and social programs designed to address legitimate grievances while maintaining galactic stability. Commander Zixara stared at the massive document with a mixture of rage and bewilderment. The humans had watched her people die in battle for weeks and responded by producing a bureaucratic manual for ending the war. They had treated the greatest military crisis in Dominion history as if it were a consulting project that required proper documentation. The realization that terrified her most was that the human proposal would probably work. The human peace proposal was implemented within 6 weeks of its presentation. Both Dominion and rebel leadership had studied the 847-page document with growing amazement and horror. Every grievance that had led to the rebellion was addressed through specific policy changes. Every economic inequality was corrected through detailed resource reallocation plans. Every source of interspecies conflict was resolved through carefully designed administrative reforms. Negotiator Dong-soo oversaw the implementation process with the same calm efficiency humans applied to everything else. He worked with representatives from both sides to establish transition committees, coordinate resource transfers, and modify governmental structures. His manner suggested he was organizing a corporate merger rather than ending a galactic war. War Marshal Throck attended the signing ceremony on Zentaris Prime with deep reluctance. The peace treaty had been drafted by humans using language so precise that it eliminated any possibility of future misinterpretation. Every clause had been calculated to balance competing interests while advancing overall stability. The terms are acceptable to all parties, Dongsu announced as he presented the final documents. Implementation will begin immediately according to the established timeline. His voice carried no trace of triumph or satisfaction. He spoke as if ending a multi-system war was a routine administrative task that had been completed on schedule. When Commander Zixara expressed grudging appreciation for human mediation efforts, Dongsu simply thanked her and moved on to the next agenda item. The treaty itself was a masterpiece of systematic problem-solving. It restructured trade relationships to eliminate economic exploitation. It modified military command structures to ensure fair representation of different species. It established cultural exchange programs to reduce interspecies prejudice. Most importantly, it created new administrative frameworks that made future rebellions both unnecessary and practically impossible. Admiral Flux Tar was the first to realize what the humans had actually accomplished. The veteran naval commander had served the Dominion for over 2 centuries and understood how galactic power really functioned. As he studied the treaty provisions, he began to see the larger pattern. The peace agreement did not simply end the rebellion. It fundamentally altered the structure of Dominion governance. Trade routes were reorganized to flow through systems where humans had established administrative centers. Military command protocols were modified to require consultation with human strategic advisors. Resource allocation decisions were subject to review by human efficiency specialists. Each change was presented as a reasonable solution to specific problems. Taken together, they gave humans indirect control over every critical aspect of Dominion operations. The modifications were so carefully integrated that removing them would destabilize the entire governmental system. Captain Rina had been assigned to coordinate logistics for the treaty implementation. Her work involved scheduling resource transfers, arranging personnel relocations, and managing communication networks. The complexity of coordinating changes across hundreds of worlds would have challenged entire Dominion departments. She handled it as a solo project with occasional assistance from other human specialists. The transition is proceeding according to plan, she reported to Dongsu during a routine status meeting. We expect full implementation within the specified time frame. Her update covered modifications to industrial production, agricultural, distribution, transportation networks, and administrative systems across 12 star systems. She discussed the coordination of billions of beings and trillions of credits in resources with the same tone she might use to describe organizing office supplies. President Yu Jin made her first visit to Zentaris Prime 3 months after the treaty signing. The leader of Earth arrived without fanfare aboard a modest transport ship. She was a former corporate executive who had been elected to manage humanity's integration into galactic civilization. Her approach to interstellar politics reflected her business background. Chancellor Vextar greeted her with full ceremonial honors. The massive state dinner included representatives from dozens of species and featured the finest cuisine from across the galaxy. Yujin thanked her hosts politely and spent most of the evening asking practical questions about Dominion administrative procedures. The integration process has exceeded our expectations, she told Chancellor Vextar during their private meeting. Human specialists have learned a great deal about galactic governance through their various assignments. Her casual reference to human activities throughout Dominion territory made the Chancellor uncomfortable. In less than a year, humans had established a presence in every major governmental department and most critical infrastructure systems. They had accomplished this expansion by being helpful rather than threatening. Your people have been quite thorough in their studies, Chancellor Vextar replied carefully. Yujin smiled and nodded. We believe in understanding systems before attempting to contribute to them. The Dominion represents thousands of years of organizational development. There is much we can learn from such accumulated wisdom. Her tone suggested genuine respect for Dominion achievements. Yet somehow her compliments felt more dangerous than direct criticism. She discussed galactic civilization as if it were an interesting business model that had potential for improvement through proper management. During her week-long visit, Yujin toured facilities across Zentaris Prime. She observed governmental departments, inspected industrial complexes, and met with administrative officials. She asked detailed questions about everything and took careful notes. Her interest appeared to be purely educational, but her presence made everyone nervous. The climax came when Admiral Fluxtar confronted Dongsu about what he perceived as human manipulation of the peace process. The veteran commander had spent weeks analyzing the treaty provisions and had reached disturbing conclusions about their true purpose. "You have not ended the rebellion," Fluxtar accused during a private meeting in his office. "You have conquered the entire Dominion without firing a single shot." Dongsu looked genuinely puzzled by the accusation. He reviewed his notes as if trying to understand where the misunderstanding had occurred. When he responded, his voice carried the same professional tone he used for all official communications. "I am not sure what you mean by conquest," Dongsu said. "We have simply helped implement solutions to the problems that led to the recent conflict. All changes were approved through proper channels by legitimate authority." Fluxtar leaned forward across his desk. "Within 5 years, every critical decision in Dominion territory will require human approval. You have made yourselves indispensable to our basic operations." Dongsu considered this statement carefully before responding. "We have tried to be helpful where our expertise seemed relevant. If our involvement has become excessive, we would be happy to discuss appropriate modifications." His willingness to negotiate made Fluxtar even more frustrated. The human showed no signs of guilt or defensive behavior. He treated the accusation of galactic conquest as if it were a scheduling conflict that could be resolved through better coordination. "Do you understand what you have done?" Fluxtar demanded. Dongsu consulted his tablet and pulled up a summary report. "We have helped establish sustainable peace, improved administrative efficiency, and strengthened interspecies cooperation. The statistical indicators suggest significant progress across all measured categories." He spoke as if galactic transformation were a quality improvement project rather than the most significant political change in 3 millennia. When Fluxtar asked about human long-term objectives, Dongsu explained that they simply wanted to contribute to galactic stability and prosperity. "We find that well-organized systems benefit everyone," he concluded. "Inefficiency creates unnecessary problems for all participants." Fluxtar left the meeting with the horrifying realization that the humans probably believed everything they had said. They had not set out to conquer the Dominion. They had simply applied their systematic approach to every problem they encountered. The result was the same as conquest, but achieved through optimization rather than aggression. The final confirmation came when trade statistics for the first year under the new treaty were published. Economic productivity had increased by 37%. Interspecies conflicts had decreased by 61%. Administrative costs had been reduced by 24%. Military expenses had dropped by 42%, while defensive capabilities had actually improved. The numbers told a clear story. Human involvement had made the Dominion more successful by every measurable standard. They had eliminated corruption, improved efficiency, and strengthened stability. They had solved problems that had existed for centuries and prevented new ones from developing. Yet somehow their very competence felt like the most terrifying thing that had ever happened to galactic civilization. The Dominion still existed in name, but everyone understood that the quiet humans who had arrived asking questions now controlled every system that really mattered. They had achieved total victory through the simple process of being better at running things than anyone else. 2 years had passed since first contact, and the galaxy had settled into what everyone called the new normal. The Galactic Dominion still existed officially, but its daily operations bore little resemblance to the system that had ruled for 3 millennia. Director Min Ho of Human Galactic Affairs maintained his office in a modest building on Zentaris Prime, managing what had quietly become the most influential organization in known space. The transformation had been so gradual that most beings barely noticed it happening. Human specialists had simply made themselves available to help with various problems. Their solutions worked so well that requesting human consultation became standard procedure for any significant decision. Within 18 months, no major policy was implemented anywhere in Dominion territory without human review and approval. Former War Marshal Throck now worked in the Conflict Resolution Department, a new organization created by human administrative specialists. His title was Senior Military Advisor, and his job involved analyzing potential sources of interspecies tension before they could develop into actual conflicts. He spent his days reviewing statistical models and attending planning meetings rather than commanding battle fleets. The predictive algorithms indicate a 73% probability of trade disputes between the Corvin and Zalarian systems within the next 6 months, analyst Na Young reported during their weekly briefing. We recommend implementing preventive mediation protocols immediately. Her tone suggested she was discussing weather patterns rather than preventing potential wars. Throck had learned to appreciate the precision of human forecasting methods, even though their clinical approach to galactic politics continued to disturb him. The humans could predict social unrest with the same accuracy they used to calculate cargo schedules. The former war marshal found his new role surprisingly satisfying. Instead of crushing rebellions after they started, he now helped prevent them from occurring. The work was less dramatic than commanding fleets in battle, but it was also more effective. Under human guidance, the Dominion had not experienced a single significant military conflict in over a year. Meanwhile, Chancellor Vexutar had been promoted to Senior Administrative Coordinator, a position that sounded impressive but involved very little actual authority. Most of his time was spent attending meetings where humans presented policy proposals that were invariably approved without discussion. His role had evolved from ruler to ceremonial figurehead, though the transition had been so smooth that he sometimes forgot how much had changed. The most disturbing aspect of human control was how reasonable it all seemed. Every modification to Dominion governance was presented as a logical solution to specific problems. The changes improved efficiency, reduced costs, and strengthened stability. No one could argue against results that benefited everyone. Ambassador Wolsick had been assigned to handle first contact with newly discovered species. His latest mission involved a warrior culture called the Drakari, whose ships had been detected at the edge of Dominion space. The species was known for aggressive expansion and had destroyed several deep space research stations before communication could be established. The Drakari fleet consisted of over 200 vessels armed with advanced weapon systems. Their leader, War Chief Gralthar, had sent messages demanding that all Dominion forces withdraw from the sector or face destruction. Intelligence reports indicated the Drakari had conquered dozens of systems through pure military force and showed no interest in diplomatic solutions. Wolsick approached the confrontation with typical human methodology. His small diplomatic vessel entered the contested system and broadcast a polite request for peaceful communication. When the Drakari fleet powered their weapons and prepared to attack, he responded by inviting their leadership to join him for tea and discussion of mutual interests. We would welcome the opportunity to learn about Drakari culture and capabilities, his message concluded. Perhaps we can identify areas where our civilizations might benefit from cooperation. War Chief Gralthar was a massive creature whose species had evolved for combat. His ship bristled with weapons designed to reduce planets to burning rubble. He had spent centuries conquering lesser species and had never encountered resistance he could not overcome through superior firepower. The human's invitation to discuss cooperation struck him as either insanity or mockery. You will surrender immediately or be destroyed, Gralthar replied. The Drakari do not negotiate with inferior beings. Wolsick's response arrived within minutes. He thanked the war chief for clarifying Drakari policy and expressed appreciation for their direct communication style. He then transmitted a comprehensive analysis of Drakari military capabilities, social structure, and territorial expansion patterns. We have prepared a detailed assessment of your civilization's strengths and strategic objectives, Wolsick explained. We believe there are significant opportunities for mutually beneficial arrangements that would advance Drakari interests while contributing to regional stability. The analysis was remarkable in its completeness and accuracy. Wolsick had somehow obtained detailed information about Drakari military organization, economic systems, and political leadership. He understood their conquest strategies, resource requirements, and long-term expansion plans better than some of their own generals. More disturbing was his evaluation of their current situation. The human had calculated exactly how much the Drakari fleet could accomplish against Dominion defenses, what the probable casualties would be, and how long their supply lines could sustain extended combat operations. His projections showed that Drakari victory was possible, but would cost them 70% of their fleet and leave them vulnerable to counterattack. Continued military expansion using current methods will result in strategic overextension within 18 months, Woolsick's report concluded. However, we have identified alternative approaches that would achieve your territorial objectives with significantly reduced risk and resource expenditure. War Chief Growthar found himself reading a business proposal rather than receiving a surrender demand. The human had treated his threat of military conquest as if it were a planning problem that required better methodology. The document suggested modifications to Drakari expansion strategy that would make them more successful at conquering their neighbors. The recommendations were practical and effective. Woolsick had identified weaknesses in Dominion border defenses that could be exploited with minimal casualties. He had calculated the optimal timing for attacks based on patrol schedules and resource allocation cycles. He had even suggested diplomatic approaches that would split Dominion allies and prevent coordinated resistance. Implementation of these strategies would increase your territorial acquisition rate by approximately 200%, while reducing military losses by 67%, the human explained during their eventual face-to-face meeting. We would be happy to provide additional consultation services to support your expansion objectives. Growthar sat across from Woolsick in the human's modest conference room, struggling to understand what was happening. He had come to conquer or destroy the Dominion. Instead, he was receiving strategic advice on how to do it more efficiently. The human discussed galactic warfare as if it were a technical problem that required proper planning. You would help us destroy your own people? The war chief demanded. Woolsick looked genuinely confused by the question. We are simply providing analysis based on available data. If military expansion serves Drakari interests, then optimizing your approach seems reasonable. His tone suggested he was offering routine consulting services rather than betraying his entire civilization. When Growthar accused him of treachery, Woolsick explained that humans believed all species should pursue their objectives through the most efficient methods possible. Unnecessary casualties benefit no one, he concluded. If conflict is inevitable, it should be conducted with appropriate planning to minimize waste and maximize strategic value. The meeting continued for 6 hours. Woolsick presented detailed analyses of galactic military capabilities, economic vulnerabilities, and political fault lines. He discussed the probable consequences of various conquest strategies and recommended approaches that would achieve Drakari objectives with minimal disruption to overall stability. By the end of their conversation, War Chief Growthar realized he was no longer planning to attack the Dominion. Instead, he was discussing partnership opportunities and resource-sharing agreements. The human had somehow transformed a military confrontation into a business negotiation without ever directly refusing the Drakari demands for conquest. 3 months later, the Drakari had established trade relationships with 17 Dominion worlds and were providing security services for commercial shipping routes. Their warriors had become peacekeepers rather than conquerors, not through defeat, but through better strategic planning. Woolsick had given them everything they wanted while eliminating their desire to take it by force. Student Kexler was part of the first generation of aliens to attend human universities. The young being had grown up during the transition period and found human educational methods fascinating rather than disturbing. His species was naturally curious